Ele tinha opiniões muito específicas sobre o filme, o papel, o que funcionou e o que não funcionou para ele. E acho que apenas assenti. Sorri bastante e concordei com tudo o que ele disse. Em 1990, Pretty Woman tornou-se a derradeira história de amor de Hollywood. Era uma história de Cinderela sobre um empresário rico que se apaixona por uma prostituta. Realizado por Gary Marshall, o filme era protagonizado por Richard Gere e pela então praticamente desconhecida Julia Roberts. Mas o que vimos no ecrã era apenas metade da história. Por detrás dos sorrisos perfeitos e dos vestidos deslumbrantes, houve 15 momentos proibidos que o estúdio nunca quis que soubesse. Erros de gravação escondidos, quase desastres, reescritas secretas e uma cena chocante que quase destruiu a magia do filme. Cada um deles conta uma história soterrada sob o conto de fadas. Então, o que aconteceu realmente atrás das câmeras e que momento mudou? Uma linda mulher para sempre. O caos na banheira é uma das cenas mais despreocupadas e alegres de Pretty Woman. Vivian a relaxar numa banheira de espuma, cantando a plenos pulmões Quis, de Prince. O momento parece espontâneo. Divertido! Quase como se estivéssemos a ver Julia Roberts a viver realmente a personagem. Mas por detrás das bolhas e das gargalhadas, a cena era um completo caos. Para começar, a banheira de Julia não estava cheia de um sabonete líquido normal. A equipe de produção queria uma espuma exagerada, perfeita para cinema, que se mantivesse fofa durante horas sob as luzes quentes do estúdio. A solução? Detergente industrial, do tipo utilizado para lavar automóveis. As bolhas ficaram ótimas na câmera, mas depois de horas de filmagens, a pele de Roberts começou a arder. Pior ainda, o sabonete agressivo removeu completamente a tinta vermelha do cabelo dela. Na manhã seguinte, o seu cabeleireiro encontrou madeixas alaranjadas nos fios. Toda a equipe teve de interromper a produção para que o seu cabelo pudesse ser pintado novamente antes da continuação das filmagens. E depois veio a partida para a qual ninguém a preparou. Na cena, Vivian tem de mergulhar a cabeça na água enquanto canta. Nesse instante, toda a equipe saiu da sala, incluindo o equipamento e o realizador Gary Marshall. Quando Vivian regressou, pronta para continuar as filmagens, percebeu que estava completamente sozinha e que tudo tinha desaparecido, deixando-a a terminar uma cena em absoluto silêncio. O choque de estampado no seu rosto foi genuíno, seguido de perto por vários minutos de gargalhadas estrondosas. Mas aquele riso foi como uma máscara de oxigênio para Roberts. Por um instante, todas as longas horas de filmagem, a pressão e o desconforto físico simplesmente evaporaram. O que parecia uma espontaneidade divertida era, na verdade, uma explosão colorida impulsionada pelo cansaço, pela irritação provocada pelo sabão e pela situação perfeita para uma boa gargalhada. A Vivian, a rapariga alegre por quem nos apaixonamos, estava literalmente a lutar para manter o sorriso apesar da dor. Prepares pipocas, porque o que aconteceu a seguir quase mudou a história de Hollywood. A origem sombria de Uma Linda Mulher. Antes das rosas e da varanda de conto de fadas, havia uma história que não acreditava em finais felizes. O argumento original de J.F. Lawton, intitulado Sem Rodeios, $3.000, não era uma comédia romântica. Era um estudo de personagem sombrio e iluminado por luzes de neon sobre uma transação que durava uma semana em Los Angeles. Um implacável investidor empresarial, Edward, paga $3.000 a uma prostituta em dificuldades. Vivian, sem transformação radical, sem resgate, apenas sobrevivência. Vivian não era corajosa nem se deixava encantar pelo luxo. Foi escrita com arestas a serem aparadas. Faleira, traumatizada e a lutar contra o tipo de demônios que os estúdios evitavam. Vício. Predação. A humilhação silenciosa de ser invisível numa cidade que só vê dinheiro. Edward, por outro lado, não era um príncipe numa limusina. Era um homem que avaliava as pessoas da mesma forma que avaliava as empresas, pelo que podia extrair delas. Com $3.000, a semana termina com um baque, não com um suspiro de felicidade. Ele deixa-a em casa. Ela fica apenas com o dinheiro e nada mais. A mensagem é brutal. As transações não se transformam em histórias de amor. Aí a Disney entrou em cena. Nada mais fácil do que adoçar o argumento e torná-las menos complicadas. Por fim, esforçaram-se para reformular tudo. A missão era clara: abandonar o niilismo, mantendo a eletricidade. A vulnerabilidade de Vivian transformou-se em sagacidade. A predação de Edward tornou-se um distanciamento que precisava de ser descongelado. O final foi construído de raiz, testado em sessões de teste, recalibrado e, finalmente, modernizado segundo o código de Cinderela. Ela salva-o imediatamente. A cidade manteve-se a mesma, mas o gênero inverteu-se. O que começou como uma história, com uma lição moral sobre poder e descartabilidade, transformou-se no padrão de ouro para a realização de desejos de forma brilhante. O mês de Uma Linda Mulher é, naturalmente, esse segredo. Um pesadelo que ganhou vida. Um sonho também devorado por ordens do estúdio, mudando não só um filme para sempre, mas toda uma década no gênero das comédias românticas. Julia Roberts quase foi substituída. É difícil imaginar Pretty Woman sem o sorriso radiante de Julia Roberts. Mas, por um breve e tenso momento, a Disney tentou apagá-la completamente do filme. Quando o estúdio adquiriu os direitos do filme, os executivos temiam que Roberts, então com apenas 21 anos e relativamente desconhecida, fosse demasiado crua para a nova imagem de conto de fadas que desejavam criar. A versão original de $3.000 escolhera na perfeição, uma rapariga vulnerável, esperta e com uma sensibilidade genuína. Mas na versão suavizada da Disney, eles queriam glamour, não realismo cru. O estúdio começou a procurar nomes mais seguros. Meg Ryan, Daryl Hannah e até Michelle Pfeiffer foram consideradas como possíveis substitutas. Um memorando executivo dizia, segundo consta, que Julia Roberts era demasiado intensa para aquele tom. Durante algumas semanas de ansiedade, ela ficou de fora. Mas Gary Marshall, o realizador do filme, recusou-se a mudar de ideias. Tinha visto a química dela nas audições, a sua incrível capacidade de fazer brilhar a tragédia. Ela é o coração do filme. Disse-lhes, se a tirar, o filme morre. Foi uma reintegração para Roberts, mas a realidade era que, quando as filmagens começaram, a pressão era enorme. Os membros da equipe lembrar-se-iam mais tarde de como ela tremia antes de cada take. O peso de carregar um filme de estúdio que já a tinha deixado nervosa era enorme. O nervosismo dela era tão grande como o de ter tido urticária antes do primeiro grande plano. A equipe de maquilhagem, com algumas exceções, precisava de lhe colocar gelo na pele entre as tomadas. No entanto, algo aconteceu quando a câmera começou a gravar. O nervosismo transformou-se em charme. O tremor na sua voz deu lugar à inocência. E o medo que quase lhe roubou o papel foi precisamente o que tornou Uma Linda Mulher inesquecível. Julia Roberts não estava apenas a interpretar Vivian. Ela era Vivian, a mulher subestimada que todos viram de repente, como ela era na realidade, quando uma brincadeira ficou para a história. É um dos momentos mais repetidos do cinema dos anos 90. A elegante suite do hotel, Richard Gere dá a apresentar um colar deslumbrante e a gargalhada contagiante de Julia Roberts enquanto fecha a pequena caixa nos dedos. É divertido, espontâneo e absolutamente perfeito. Mas eis o segredo que ninguém deve saber. Nada disto estava no guião. O momento não foi coreografado, planeado ou aprovado. Durante o ensaio, Julia estava com dificuldades em encontrar o tom certo. O ambiente parecia tenso. A química, forçada. O realizador Gary Marshall sussurrou a Gere, faz algo para a surpreender. Assim, quando as câmeras começaram a gravar e Roberts se inclinou para admirar o colar, Gere fechou a montra de repente. O seu suspiro e riso não eram fingidos. Ficaram em puro choque. A equipa caiu na gargalhada durante as filmagens. Marshall gritou, corta! É por aí. Essa é a cena. A explosão fortuita de risos transformou-se num dos maiores gestos românticos da história do cinema. Um testemunho de que os melhores momentos não podem ser encenados. Mas em Laughter Among, houve algo ainda mais profundo que nunca chegou ao público. O colar em si não era um adereço, mas uma joia. Era uma peça de design de Fred Jolie avaliada em mais de $250 mil. Um item enviado para o platô sob a vigilância atenta de 2 guardas armados que nunca desviavam o olhar. Cada vez que Gere segurava a caixa, um representante da joalharia agachava-se fora do campo de visão da câmera, como um falcão, a observar. Se caísse, a produção teria sido interrompida instantaneamente. Assim, aquele movimento brusco na caixa era para ser uma brincadeira inofensiva, mas acabou por se tornar uma aposta muito perigosa. Um único passo em falso teria custado ao estúdio $250 mil, mas acabou por se transformar em magia de Hollywood. Apenas um segundo sem guião numa fantasia impecável que se tornou real, humana e inesquecível. A estrela nervosa, Julia Roberts, irradiava confiança no ecrã. Mas, atrás das câmeras, estava longe de ser calma. Com apenas 21 anos, tornou-se subitamente protagonista de um grande filme de estúdio, um projeto que já tinha sido reescrito, reformulado e remodelado várias vezes. Para Roberts, foi uma experiência emocionante e aterradora. Na mesma medida, os membros da equipa recordavam que, antes de quase todas as cenas românticas ou emocionalmente intensas, ela começava a tremer. Her hands trembled so much that she had to hold props with both of them to keep steady. One makeup artist later admitted that Julia's lips sometimes quivered uncontrollably right before action, and they'd have to redo her lipstick between takes. She was very anxious, but the real thing was pressure. The pressure of replacing actresses with experience, shooting alongside Richard Gere, and watched by studio executives who'd already tried firing her once. The fear of losing her dream role hovered at every line. At one of the first love scenes, it got so hot that it had to stop with the director. Roberts' pulse raced so fast that her forehead displayed blood vessels visibly bulging. Gary Marshall, ever the patient mentor, walked over, sat beside her on the bed, and just started talking. Not directly talking. Cracked jokes, told silly stories, reminded her to breathe, and slowly she relaxed. And when the camera rolled again, something shifted. That nervous energy turned into vulnerability, into the very softness that made audiences adore Vivian. What looked like effortless charm was, in truth, the work of a young woman channeling her fear into something honest. The trembling, the smiles, the bashful glances, none of it was acting. It was Julia Roberts finding her courage in real time. The real Richard Gere. Before he became the suave businessman who swept Vivian off her feet, Richard Gere wanted nothing to do with Pretty Woman. When the script first landed on his desk, he dismissed it as a fluff piece, a shallow fairy tale about a man who buys affection. Gere was already known for serious roles and didn't see himself in a glossy romantic comedy. He turned it down several times. But fate and Julia Roberts had other plans. Director Gary Marshall arranged a casual meeting between the two leads at a hotel in New York. Gere was polite, but detached, clearly ready to decline again. As the meeting wrapped up, Roberts scribbled a note on a post-it, slid it across the table, and smiled. It read, "Please say yes." Gere later said that when he looked into her eyes, he felt something electric. "I just knew," he recalled. "We had magic." Moments later, he called Marshall and agreed to do the film. Almost unknown to the fans is that Gere was not only acting the cultured, mysterious man, but perhaps had the option to turn into it. A lifelong musician, he himself played the plaintive piano tune in the hotel scene, having composed it the night before filming. The melody was not scripted. It was pure Gere from his heart and mind. But as the masses were fainting, Richards was not comfortable with the film's message. He later stated that he felt uneasy with the way the story glorified riches and power. "It was a fantasy," he added, "but a beautiful one." This contradiction itself, the charm wrapped around quiet unease, was the very thing that made Edward Lewis work. Richard Gere did not just portray the gentleman, he revealed the man underneath the mask. The fight scene that went too far. Toward the end of Pretty Woman, the movie takes a rare, sharp turn. Edward Lewis, usually calm and composed, snaps, throwing his slick lawyer Philip Stuckey against the wall in a sudden burst of anger. It's a cathartic moment, the only time we see Edward lose control. But behind the camera, that scene got a lot more real than anyone planned. Director Gary Marshall wanted the confrontation to feel raw and unscripted. He told Richard Gere and Jason Alexander, who played Stuckey, to improvise the argument. "Don't choreograph it," he said, "let it happen." What followed was a take that no one saw coming. Gere lunged at Alexander with genuine fury, slamming him into a prop table with such force that one of the actor's dental crowns popped loose. They all froze. For a moment, it was impossible to tell whether Alexander had really hurt himself or had merely been staging the fall. Then the actor burst into laughter, clutching his mouth. "Well, that was so true," he said. The crew roared, but Marshall did not call for another take. He had gotten precisely what he wanted. The unfiltered explosion revealed Edward to be a human. That raw footage became what the audience would eventually see as their final version. Away from the set, Gere was horrified to think that he had injured his co-star. He offered Alexander generous apologies, who shrugged it off easily and said that the incident gave him the most expensive trip to the dentist in Hollywood. Eventually, this unintentional whack brought celluloid gold, a carefully staged battle. It turned out to be two actors just putting in instinct. Then the look of one momentarily enveloped in pain became movie truth. Ironically, the most violent scene in Pretty Woman ended up being the most honest. The dangerous set secrets. For a film remembered for its glossy charm and effortless romance, the set of Pretty Woman was anything but safe. Behind those perfect Beverly Hills backdrops were moments of near disaster, scenes that could have gone terribly wrong. Take the driving scenes. For instance, when Vivian takes the wheel of Edward's sleek Lotus, the carefree energy feels infectious. But what the audience never saw was that Julia Roberts barely knew how to drive. She'd mentioned it during rehearsals, but Gary Marshall wanted authenticity. "We'll keep it slow," he said. Instead, the narrow streets of Hollywood Boulevard turned into a gauntlet. Roberts stalled the car repeatedly, jumped curbs, and at one point nearly clipped a parked limousine. Crew members were quietly stationed off camera, ready to grab the wheel if things went wrong. The car carries with it a story in its own right. Porsche and Ferrari had both refused to lend cars for the shoot because the adult themes would tarnish their respective reputations. afastaram-se, reabrindo as portas a Lotus, uma marca que na altura lutava para se manter relevante e que ofereceu o seu espírito prateado. Com o sucesso de Pretty Woman, as vendas da Lotus triplicaram em todo o mundo, pelo que a aposta valeu a pena. No outro caso, durante as filmagens em exteriores, alguns locais foram filmados sem as devidas autorizações, tendo sido feita uma montagem rápida enquanto as equipas fugiam antes da chegada da polícia e dos curiosos. Julia brincou: metade do nosso filme foi filmado enquanto fugíamos. Embora Rodeo Drive possa parecer glamurosa, o filme foi filmado cena a cena de forma improvisada e quase caótica. Mesmo assim, de alguma forma, funcionou. Perigoso, improvisado, sentindo a adrenalina. Tudo isto impulsionou Uma Linda Mulher. A magia brilhante do filme não foi criada em paz, foi esculpida entre as rochas do risco. Quase sempre, aguentem-se, o que vinha a seguir não só partia corações, como também quebrava as regras da Disney. Cenas apagadas e ocultas. A mulher bonita que conhecemos, uma fantasia refinada e emocionante, foi construída sobre as cinzas de uma história muito mais sombria. E embora a reescrita da Disney tenha suavizado o tom, nem tudo chegou à versão final. Cenas inteiras foram filmadas, editadas e depois silenciosamente arquivadas. Demasiado cruas, demasiado sombrias ou simplesmente demasiado reais para a versão que o estúdio queria vender. Entre os momentos perdidos mais perturbadores estava uma cena que mostrava o vício de Vivian. No argumento original de J. F. Lawton, ela era uma viciada em recuperação que usava substâncias para escapar à brutalidade do seu mundo. Julia Roberts filmou uma versão inicial desta cena, sentada sozinha no seu apartamento, a contar notas amassadas ao lado de uma TV com a imagem a piscar. Era impactante, mas os executivos da Disney acharam que destruía a magia. As cenas foram descartadas e substituídas pela agora icônica montagem da banheira de espuma, que dava a impressão de que Vivian estava esperançosa e não derrotada. Outra sequência apagada mostrava Edward a dizer friamente a Vivian para ir embora após a semana que tinham passado juntos. Vivian regressa ao seu pequeno apartamento, ainda com os $3.000 em dinheiro, percebendo que está a ser paga para ir embora. Originalmente, a história terminava ali, num ciclo trágico. No entanto, o público de teste detestou. Não queriam algo realista, queriam redenção. A Disney enterrou as filmagens imediatamente e exigiu uma reescrita. Outros pequenos cortes também desapareceram. Uma cena alternativa de compras em que Vivian é humilhada mais profundamente e uma discussão mais longa em que Edward sai pior na fita. O estúdio chamou a estas edições correções de tom, mas para qualquer membro da equipa no set, eram a verdade reescrita. Os últimos vestígios de uma história que Uma Linda Mulher nunca teve permissão para se tornar. Por detrás de cada gargalhada e cena de amor, existe uma história não contada, escondida nos arquivos da Disney, preservando o coração proibido do filme. O escândalo do cartaz. It's one of the most recognizable movie posters in Hollywood history. Julia Roberts, in a black mini dress and thigh-high boot, leaning playfully back-to-back with Richard Gere in his sharp grey suit. The tagline, "She walked off the street into his life and stole his heart." But what audiences didn't know was that the image selling the fantasy wasn't entirely real. In fact, that's not Julia Roberts' body at all. When the marketing team began designing the poster, they wanted something sleek and symmetrical. The photos from the actual shoot, however, didn't fit the aesthetic they envisioned, so they brought in Donna Scoggins, a professional body double, to pose in Roberts' place. Her legs, torso, and stance were used for the final image. Then Julia's smiling face was seamlessly edited on top. Not that even he, Richard Gere, was spared from digital surgery. That famously silver hair, dark browned in post-production to make him look younger and create more contrast with Julia's red hair. The final result was a poster that sold the illusion of timeless glamour, but looked nothing like the two actors in real life. For many years, only a handful of people within the design team knew about it. But it was confirmed by Scoggins. Those are my legs. My body, just not my head. When the truth came out. It was not malicious, she explained, but it was marketing. Yet for Roberts, it became a symbol of how Hollywood wanted to control her image right down to the silhouette. The Pretty Woman poster may have captured a perfect fantasy, but at the same time, it spoke to a much deeper truth. Even when a woman's name is on the marquee, sometimes her image still belongs to someone else. The red dress battle. Few movie costumes are as iconic as the flowing scarlet gown Julia Roberts wears to the opera in Pretty Woman. It's elegance, transformation, and empowerment stitched into one unforgettable image. But what fans don't know is that the dress that defined Vivian Ward almost never existed in red. When costume designer Marilyn Vance Straker presented her first sketches, the studio executives pushed back immediately. They wanted black. In their minds, a dark gown symbolized sophistication, safer, subtler, more Disney-friendly. Vance disagreed. She argued that black would make Vivian fade into the background, while red would make her come alive. "This is the moment she becomes her own woman," she said. "She needs to own the room." The debate turned into a week-long standoff. Screen tests were done with both colors, and even Julia herself was torn. Under the stage lights, the black gown looked elegant but lifeless. The red, on the other hand, glowed romantic and daring, a visual heartbeat against Gere's tuxedo. And in the end, it was Vance. The custom red silk dress, made from scratch, was Claudia's design to enhance Roberts' movements. As the film camera traveled along the staircase, the light embellished every gentle curve and fold of the fabric. According to reports, the crew gasped when they saw the dress on the monitors. The dress defined not only a scene, but also a character. A woman who was hitherto regarded as dispensable became a manifestation of confidence, beauty, and strength. While the executives wanted something that was safe, the costume designer delivered something unforgettable. The red dress was not only fashionable, it was a rebellion and became one of the most enduring symbols of Hollywood femininity. Bold, unapologetic, and impossible to ignore. The trick behind Julia Roberts' laugh is so unmistakable that it became her trademark. The bright, unfiltered sound that made Pretty Woman feel alive. But what most fans don't know is that getting that laugh on camera was one of the hardest challenges of the entire shoot. Roberts, still new to fame and constantly under pressure, struggled to relax during the lighter scenes. Between takes, she'd fidget, overthink, and tighten up, her laughter coming out forced or brittle. Director Gary Marshall knew the movie depended on her charm, feeling genuine. If Julia doesn't laugh naturally, he told the crew, "We don't have a movie." So he came up with a trick. During the scene where Vivian lounges on the bed watching I Love Lucy, Marshall crouched just out of frame with a feather, waiting. When the cameras rolled, Roberts started to giggle, but not quite enough. Without warning, Marshall tickled her foot. The reaction was immediate, a full, uncontrollable burst of laughter that lit up the room. That take, the real, unscripted one, was the version used in the final cut. Once the cameras started rolling, Marshall would repeat this for many variations. Small surprises, little jokes, or secluded asides intended only for her. He understood that spontaneity, not direction, brought authenticity to Julia, so Marshall put her to the test. Even Disney's editors caught on and began slipping her unadulterated laughter into other moments, where it could be used to tie in warmth. What the audience saw as seemingly spontaneous joyousness was really magical manipulation done with determination. Behind every sparkling laugh was a director quietly maneuvering and a young performer learning to give in. In essence, it was more than acting. It was Julia Roberts claiming her laughter, one tickle at a time. The ending that almost wasn't. It's the moment that defines Pretty Woman. Edward standing tall in the back of a white limousine, roses in hand, calling up to Vivian's balcony like a modern knight. She leans down, smiling through tears, and he says the line that seals their fairy tale. What happens after he climbs up and rescues her? Vivian replies. She rescues him right back. Perfect! Iconic. But that ending, the one the world fell in love with, rarely existed. In the original script, Tres Mil Dólares, there was no rescue, no balcony, and no promise of love. Edward leaves Vivian on the street with a grim handshake and an envelope full of cash. She watches his car disappear, sits on a bus, and stares blankly out the window. The script ends with silence and despair. It was realistic, but it was also devastating. But when Disney bought the project, the ending had undergone several changes. Early drafts replaced the tragedy with ambivalent endings. Edward was seen driving away, looking back, or Vivian was seen walking off toward a new job instead of a new love. All of these tested poorly. The audiences wanted catharsis, not cynicism. So one night, director Gary Marshall went into his office with an empty notepad and rewrote the ending by himself. He had the vision of a contemporary fairy tale, a man who seemingly had it all and suddenly found he needed something money could not buy. The following morning, he pitched it to the cast. Roberts loved the ending so much, she cried right there on the set. That impromptu rewrite is now cemented in cinema history as one of the most popular endings. It started as a story about money and ended up telling a tale of redemption. The line that was intended to close a transaction instead closed a timeless love story. The panic before the perfect take. Not every piece of Pretty Woman magic came from laughter. Some of it came from sheer endurance. Julia Roberts, though radiant on screen, faced a battle few knew about. On set, panic attacks that struck without warning. During the middle of filming, the pressure of carrying a multi-million-dollar production began taking its toll. Crew members recalled moments when Roberts would shake, her breathing shallow, her hands clutching her chest, just before action. Director Gary Marshall quickly realized that Julia's biggest obstacle wasn't acting, it was anxiety. He began adjusting the entire filming schedule to ease her mind. Scenes that demanded close-ups or emotional intensity were shot after lighter takes to help her stay grounded. During one pivotal scene, when Roberts froze mid-line, Marshall didn't shout, "Cut!" Instead, he sat beside her, took her hand, and said quietly, "We can wait." That pause changed the day. Roberts reset, took a deep breath, and delivered one of the most moving moments in the film. Her vulnerability no longer a weakness, but the movie's emotional core. From that moment on, the entire crew rallied around her, treating every scene as a delicate balance between performance and protection. Each take became less about perfection and more about trust. An unspoken rule came into play during the production: protect Julia's serenity, protect the film. Disney executives, some of the most ruthless micromanagers, were ordered off the set whenever things were heavy for her. The end of the shooting found panic in its final throes, and confidence started to flourish. What audiences perceived as Vivian's charm and fragility was not merely acting, but Julia channeling her terrified state into something agonizingly real. Behind all the glimmer and the smiles was a woman fighting for poise and winning. Brace yourself. The next revelation turned a Hollywood gamble into a global storm. The global shockwave. When Pretty Woman premiered in March 2090, no one, not even Disney, expected the tidal wave that was coming. It was supposed to be a modest romantic comedy, a gamble to see if audiences would embrace a modern-day Cinderella story. Instead, it became a global phenomenon, redefining what Hollywood thought a love story could be. The film grossed $464 million worldwide, a staggering number for its time. For comparison, that was more than Die Hard 2 and Home Alone combined. It stayed in theaters for months, powered by word of mouth and repeat viewings. Couples saw it on date nights, friends went in groups, and even cynics who dismissed it as fluff couldn't deny its magnetic charm. The critics have joined the ranks of being equally amazed, again hailing Julia Roberts' very brilliant performance as the next big thing and America's new sweetheart. The actress broke the record for winning a Golden Globe as Best Actress, giving competition to Meryl Streep and Demi Moore. And on her way to her second nomination for the Academy Award, she won all this before the year's end of being 23. Overnight, the would-be star became the highest-paid actress in Hollywood, taking home millions for each film. The shockwaves, in other words, had not only hit the shores of America, the film has penetrated almost every corner of Europe, Asia, and Latin America. In Japan, fans lined up outside theaters dressed as Vivian, clutching red roses. The Italian fashion houses saw spikes in sales of their red dresses. Pretty Woman changed the terms of the game that one must die to enter the hotly contested world of romantic comedy. And that's the untold story behind the Quinze forbidden scenes from Pretty Woman. The secrets, accidents, and chaos that made movie magic. Which moment surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Hollywood's hidden stories, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss what's next. Thanks for watching, and don't go anywhere. The next video on your screen is one you won't want to miss.